right, now it's time to settle down in earnest towards Mississippi Fortress. One of the things that I didn't do was I didn't go over the specific roles for this game. The reason being I want the standard roles to stand on their own as a series introduction, um, just in case people, are playing one of the other games. So this one has a couple of special roles. First of all, the um, the commanders for the game, Grant Pemberton. I have to talk kind of quietly because my wife's sleeping and she yelled at me last time that like I was up here. Um, the commanders in the game, Grant, Pemberton, and Johnson, are also counted as officers. Grant has the capability to act as an officer, and Pemberton and Johnston actually are both commanders and officers. There are no officers in the base game of it. Now, the optional rules are a little different, where we have, well, I've put the counters away, but basically Stevenson has his own division and stuff like that, and there's a slightly different organizational thing. Unfortunately, the game doesn't really support those rules in the first edition. It may support the optional rules better in later editions. But anyway, what this means is you don't really have, the Confederates don't have separate officer units that they have to trace to. The Confederate infantry units have to trace back to their commander as though they were, as though those commanders were their officers. In addition, well, that's it. You get no additional. So the Confederates are going to be operating in a smaller footprint than the Union actually can, being able to spread out its divisional commands. Think of specifics of chain of command, who gets in charge of what and who gets what replacements. The Union has corps as their principal formation. Sherman has 2 different corps under his command. And they're considered separate formations, though, when they're in the line. So he can really only command one of them in battle. The Confederates have a formation of the Army, which is either Johnston or Pemberton's army. And there was something weird in the little scenario, which, and maybe it'll end up in this one too, where units that are marked for one army were stacked with the other. And I don't know why that is, and whether that's a typo. I didn't find any errata. Okay. The home areas. Remember, the commanders have to trace back to home areas. Well, the Union has no home area. And essentially what that means is they don't care. The Confederates have 2 home areas. Johnston treats Area 15 over here as his home area. Now, maybe there's some rules in the victory point section about this. I don't remember there being any. And Pemberton treats Section 18, Vicksburg, as his home area. We'll look at the victory points a little later. I didn't look at them entirely when I was playing, but for example, I don't see anything listed here that relates to having to trace back, and that's the only impact that home areas are supposed to have. Weather. We have 3 types of weather. Clear, everything's normal. Heat, you add 1 to the straggle table, and rain, you add 1 to the straggle table, and 2 if it's the second turn of rain. In addition, combat rounds fought in rainy weather have a lower combat intensity rating. And I think I'm going to go with the die roll for weather. The span of the game, though, is kind of annoying. You wouldn't want heat happening in April, and there's no distinguishment of that. That's a problem. The table, I think, does not distinguish between months. It's just this simple table here. And that seems a little unreasonable, but maybe I can make a rule that, I don't know, that heat can't happen before you enter at least maybe May. I mean, I'm not saying there can't be warm days in April, but man, that's stretching it, I think. Even in the Midwest. Okay. There's some special units. So the Union has gunboats and steamers. They move along these arrows, and they don't have to stop unless they hit a Confederate shore battery. They can move upstream, no more than 2 arrows per movement phase, but they can move downstream as far as they want, and that's in the direction of the arrows. And they can combine that movement, say moving downstream, upstream a couple arrows, and then back downstream. I don't know why they'd want to do all 3 of those, but they might. The steamers have to begin, well, Union units that begin the movement phase in an area adjacent to a river arrow with a transport steamer can load onto the transports, and the transport can move either up or down the river. And then the Union land units and transport steamers had to begin together in order to embark. You can't embark from an area that's controlled by Confederate units, which kind of means if there's real Confederate units in the area, you can't get out. You can't leave, but there's an exception somewhere, as there always are in these rules. At the beginning of the Union movement phase, they go underneath the transport. After all, I haven't done any naval movement in this scenario that I have. After all other Union movement is completed, but before Union combat begins, the Union units can then disembark from transport steamers onto any adjacent land areas that are not controlled by Confederate units. They may not move further that phase. You can embark, move by transport, and then disembark in the same movement phase. Each transport steamer can carry up to 6 combat strength points. If you have too many strength points for a steamer, you can combine steamers and carry multiple, use multiple steamers to carry a unit. You can also carry multiple units on steamers. Normally, Union land units may not embark from or disembark into an area controlled by Confederate units. However, the Union player can use retreat before combat or withdrawal combat orders to evacuate onto the steamers during the Confederate player's combat phase. They must be in land areas adjacent to a river arrow containing transport steamers. Each unit evacuated must roll on the straggler loss table. Those losses will not be stragglers. They will be killed or captured, actually. And then the steamers aren't allowed to move until the Union player's next movement phase. You can trace line of communication across the Mississippi and Yazoo River if there's a transport steamer between them. The Confederates have some shore batteries on the board. Union units cannot just move past these, but they have to stop and undergo attack. After they take an attack, they're free to continue moving. The batteries are face up in their starting areas. They may not move, retreat before combat, or engage in combat. Like artillery units, the shore batteries have limited control over the area that they occupy and over the river arrow adjacent to the area they occupy. Union units may not disembark into an area that has a shore battery. If Union land units occupy an area with a shore battery and no Confederate units are in that area, no other, not counting dummies or leaders, the shore battery will be destroyed and removed from the game. Okay, like I said, the naval units have to stop when they move adjacent to a shore battery and undergo an attack. And after they take their attack, they're free to continue. The batteries can fire at each stack of naval units that stops during the Union movement phase. They may only fire once at each stack moving downstream, but twice at each stack that's moving upstream. Slower movement. To attack, you roll and consult Shore Battery CRTA, which is over there. And that's basically a 1 in 6 if you're in order to hit. However, if only one ship's present, it's more likely you'll hit, or if that ship is made of wood, and then you're going to roll to see whether you're hitting the front ship or the back ship in the stack. This is important, and we'll see a point about that in a moment. A 2-ship stack taking losses represents the tactic of lashing a vulnerable transport steamer to a gunboat for protection. Do we have a stacking rule for these? I don't remember seeing one, which sounds like you can stack as many ships as you want. Okay. If the Union transport steamers carrying land units are sunk by shore batteries, both the steamer and the land units they're transporting are lost, and they count for victory points. Shore batteries cannot be attacked by naval units in any way. They can only be destroyed by having Union land units occupy the areas they're sited in. But if at least one Union gunboat remains opposite the Grand Gulf Shore Battery for 5 consecutive turns, and it's being shot at through all of these turns, only, I guess, once per turn, I don't know, which is kind of weird because it's like, well, if it's going downstream, it only gets shot at once. If it's going upstream, it gets shot at twice. But if it's just parked there trading shots, it only gets shot at once, I guess. I don't know. The battery is silenced. It gets flipped over. It remains silenced until the beginning of the next Confederate player turn, in which case it can be turned face up, and then it has 5 more turns of firing at it. Weird. But you can basically park at it, and because you're only taking 1 in 6 chances, you don't actually have to park. You just have to move. You could actually just you could have different ships move by there. It says remains opposite, but somewhere it says doesn't have to be the same one. I don't remember where. Oh, it need not be the same gunboat, which to me just indicates that if you have a ship there for 5 consecutive turns, you're able to silence that battery. And that'll give you a chance to get the transports by, and the gunboats don't really matter except as a way to get your transports through. Confederate General Bowen was outstanding when he was fighting on his own. He's considered to have an inherent officer in that division who has a 2-2 rating. This allows you to pick an order as though there's a 2-point leader there, or as though there's a leader there. The line position with Bowen's division may qualify for a column shift based on his leadership, and it can be used to contest attackers' occupation of an area. This only applies if Bowen is attacking and defending in the absence of Pemberton or his replacement, and I think you can't do it if you have a mixed command as normal. The Union and Confederates have militia. In addition to normal militia rules, the Vicksburg garrison is actually a militia unit. Remember, there's rules for garrisons. Well, there's also militia rules, and this counts as militia. It's a 1-point unit. It can move around. It doesn't have to stay in Vicksburg, and it has all the normal rules for garrisons. The Union Provisional Division is like a normal. I don't know why. It doesn't have any special rules. It's just they decided to put it in there. Okay. Some of the Confederate units were very small brigades, loosely organized into an army under General Joe Johnston. The Confederate player can assimilate these small units into large ones. Any Confederate infantry division that's taken a loss can be rebuilt by moving strength points from a Confederate infantry brigade. The combat strength point transfers occur at any time during Confederate movement. The Confederate must have the units in the same area, or he can bring them together during movement. The brigade-sized units are removed from the map, and you add their strength point to the division being upgraded. You must destroy the entire brigade, even if you can't use all its strength. And whatever. Confederate brigades with J can only be used to build up strength of divisions can be used to build up both J and P formations. Those with a P formation identifier can only be used to build up Pemberton's army. Now, Pemberton's going to be over here, Johnston over here, just as a reminder. You can never go higher than your initial strength point. There's special terrain. So there's mountainous terrain, areas 3, 10, and 18. So that's these 3, and they've got kind of this brown going through them. And how can you distinguish that from this brown? Geez, I don't know. It's a little darker, but yeah. This map is not easy to read. That's why they wrote them in there. Okay. It follows standard combat procedure as laid out in the standard rules. However, mandatory combat may be required in these areas, and if combat occurs in such a case, only one player's forces may end the combat phase in these types of areas. If the phasing player moves into Area 18 from any adjacent area, he must declare combat, if units of the non-phasing player occupy the area. If the phasing player moves into areas 3 or 10 from areas 2 or 9, well, if you move from 2 to 3, you're crossing a major river, so you're going to have problems anyway. He must declare combat if the non-phasing player occupies these areas. Exception, you don't have to declare combat if moving into area 3 from areas 4 and or 11. Well, that's not an exception. That's... Nor does he have to if moving into area 10 from areas 3 or 11. Yeah, great. You know, these are not exceptions. These are counterexamples, things that aren't specified in this rule. I don't know, and therefore don't apply. Mandatory withdrawals. If the attacker is forced to declare combat and any of the defender's units remain in the mountainous area after one or both combat rounds, the attacker must withdraw in the adjacent area he moved from as if he had played withdrawal combat orders during the round. Swamp terrain. Swamp areas, you cannot move from one swamp area to another swamp area. Well, what's a swamp area? I'm guessing this blue stuff. It's specified here. It doesn't tell you what color it is. It shows you kind of a picture, and it gives you the numbers of the areas, and it appears to be all this blue crap. So we're just going to pretend it's all of it and hope that's right. You cannot move from one swamp area to another using regular land movement unless there's a road or a railroad connecting them. And there ain't a lot of roads and railroads going through there. There's one road going through here. But basically, you're not going to be slogging through the swamp. It looks to me like you can never leave New Carthage where some units start, which might be a problem. Let's see. Artillery can only enter or exit swamp between roads. Players may not force march into or out of the swamp. No unit may move from one swamp directly to another using regular land movement unless they're connected. Yeah, it's beginning to sound... Okay, I think I could use a steamer to get out of this area, but otherwise these guys are stuck in that swamp if I can't get a boat down there. Players may not force march. Okay. A unit could move directly from one swamp to another if the two areas are separated by or adjacent to a major river and it's transported by steamer. Yeah, so the only way out of this area that I start in is using a... oh, unless this is a road. This is a road going along the river, I guess. Okay. So yes, I can walk down further. Great. I'm not as unhappy as I thought I was. Again, the map is hard to read for me. These pretty cartoony maps, it's not really cartoony, it's more like a pencil drawn map, really don't work for me. Yeah, it's Barber. They're beautiful to look at, not so much fun to try to puzzle out. Mississippi and Yazoo, these are too wide to attack across or even cross without naval assistance. They have no crossing points. Huh. I wonder what that is. I guess that's a boat arrow. I don't know. Okay. It looks the same as one of these. Whatever that is. Do we have that listed on the key, which is over here? Yeah, I think that's like a bridge ferry or something or another. Bridge ferry or ford. I think that's the symbol for that. Interesting. So I'm thinking the Yazoo might be able to be crossed up here is what they're trying to say. If it is, there's not a lot of Confederates in the way there, and that looks really easy. If it's not, gosh, that sucks. And I think it shouldn't be, because otherwise Grant would just go marching across. So I don't know. They have no crossing points. In order to cross the Mississippi or Yazoo, the Union land units would have to board transport steamers and then disembark onto adjacent land areas on the other side of the river, remember, not controlled by the enemy. So we have kind of an ugly situation. There's no crossing point here. So we could cross into the swamp here. And this appears to be one area, so then you could march up. You could come down here. Hey, look, Grand Gulf is like over here. It's not really protecting that crossing area, I don't think. Again, not absolutely sure. I mean, you know, you wouldn't think this battery. I don't know, it's Grand Bluff, right? Grand Gulf. It's like this whole area. So I don't know, maybe it controls all kinds of areas. Maybe it only controls one. I don't know what a battery consists of. Great. See, there's a reason I didn't want to play this. Yeah, nice. Okay. The fortress of Vicksburg was extremely powerful. If the Union cannot take Vicksburg by combat, he can besiege it. Vicksburg, and remember it has special rules for combat because it's mountainous and all kind of crap like that. Besieging Vicksburg, it's considered besiege if a Union combat units occupy areas 10, 19, and 23 simultaneously. 10, I don't know where 19 is. Maybe this is a 19 and not a 14. Is there a 14 somewhere? Shit, I don't know. Again, these numbers aren't in any particular order. There's 14 up there. So yeah, I guess this is a 19. It looks like a 4 to me because there's like a dot or something coming out of it. And 23. So yeah, if I cut them off on this side of the river and swamp, I besiege it. And if Confederates also occupy 10, 19, and 23, Vicksburg is still considered besieged, even though, as long as Union units are there. At the end of the first Confederate player turn in which Vicksburg is besieged, there's a Vicksburg supplies marker, which will be traveling along this track. At the end of each consecutive Confederate turn in which the siege continues, the marker moves down until it hits 0. If the siege is lifted, the Vicksburg supply marker starts moving up 1 space per turn until it hits 10. The marker can never go above 10, i.e. to the position it was in at the beginning of the game, essentially, which is at 11, I guess. I don't know. If Vicksburg supplies marker enters 0, any and all Confederate forces in areas 10, 18, 19, and 23, i.e. everything in that general region, will surrender. Remove them from the board. They count for victory points as casualties. If Vicksburg is captured by the Union player, either through combat or siege, the Confederate player must retake Area 18 within 3 turns. No Union units in the area, or the game is over. At that point, you calculate victory. Now, it's possible that the Union could trigger a Vicksburg victory and still lose the game, but they get a lot of victory points for it. So I did the Champion Hill introductory scenario, and that had some real weirdness with it. But let's take a look at this. We're going to be playing not Grant's Land Campaign, but Porter runs the battery, which allows me to move to play with the boats. The other scenario kind of starts with Grant already across the river, and I think it's more fun to play with boats. And we have the setup there. Confederate units may not move south of the Big Bayou Pier River until turn 6, or until the Union player lands forces in area 43, whichever comes first. This is 43. What am I not allowed to do? I'm not allowed to move south of the Big Bayou Pier. That's this river here. So, yeah, you know. As long as I can get down here, they can't control all the areas, which is kind of maybe important. And I think this battery's got to handle all the rivers, all the river spaces over here. I don't think it's going to handle that one, and this one I think is over this side. So I think it only handles this one because this is up on a small river. That's my argument. But there's a way of slipping by and getting by in that case. Again, that's my interpretation, which may not be correct. What do we got here? But I do have to get by these batteries, depending on when the boats come in and where. Which is actually in the reinforcements. The gunboats show up in area 1, which is up here. So yeah, I got to go buy 2 batteries. I can avoid this one if I so desire. Yep. And I could also land in the swamp here, which area is divided here. So I can actually get into there, and I don't see much point to going down to hard times and having to work my way all the way up, except maybe it makes more sense. And that's actually the historical. The victory conditions are identical to those on 6.2, which is this big list here. So victory is determined after the Union has held Vicksburg for 3 turns, or the end of game turn 38, which is the end of the game up there. Whichever comes first. Victory is higher point total than the other player at the end of the game. During the course of the game, both players can earn victory points. Some are earned each turn, and some at the end of the game. Okay. The Union gets victory points at the end of the Union phase each turn. 1 for each turn Vicksburg is besieged. 2 for each strength point the Confederates lose. That turn, basically. 3 for each unrecovered Confederate. Oh, these are end of the game. For each unrecovered Confederate. 1 point for each unrecovered Confederate straggler. 3 for each Confederate infantry division that's been turned ineffective. 10 if Jackson's captured and no Confederates occupy that area by the end of the game. And I'm assuming that applies to here. Strangely enough, the victory conditions for 6.1 aren't really spelled out. There's nothing that gives you victory points. So if you follow the rules completely, the Union has 8, the Confederates have 15, and nobody has any chance to gain any others. But if you use this rules for victory points, well, then is there 10 points for Jackson? Yeah, I don't know. 50 if Vicksburg is captured by turn 15 and no Confederates reoccupy it by the end of the game. 25 if it's captured by turn 30. So, the faster you can get it, the better. 20 if it's captured by the end of the game. The Confederates get 1 for each turn that Jackson is held by the Confederates. That's going to add up. 1 for each Union unit that can't trace a line of communications to its officer. And that's each turn. 3 for each combat strength point lost by the Union. They pay more for their units than the Confederates do. 5 for each Union naval unit that's been lost. And then end of game, 1 for each unrecovered Union straggler, 4 for each Union artillery that's infantry that's ineffective at the end of the game. 20 if Vicksburg stays Confederate and not under siege. Okay, here's the rule. If you're trying to gain any of the any of the victory conditions using an infantry unit, the infantry must be able to trace a line of communication to its commanding officer during the Confederate communications phase, during the turn in which the points are claimed. Now, remember, they're only allowed to trace one area, so you might have some difficulties. So, for example, this is giving you a victory point for keeping Johnson sitting in Jackson for a long time rather than using him. And that's kind of important because it's going to create a disincentive for moving Johnson around and using him, effectively with Pemberton. So that's the idea there. All right, I have babbled enough and don't really feel like starting anymore. So I'll be back tomorrow, I guess. Okay, so I'm actually starting now. Got a big stack of boats here. Some steamers, some gunboats. And the real question is, where do I want to make my landing, And that requires a little bit of consideration and thought. First of all, where can I get? Well, I am assuming that this part of the Yazoo does not actually have a ferry crossing. If it does, then I could just bust my way in here and the whole game doesn't seem to be what it is, So what else am I left with? Well, it looks actually like I can just bust in up here. The problem is this is mountainous terrain. Coming from the swamp into the mountainous terrain had some special rules on the landing. I mean, this is really the key to the game: is how is Grant going to launch his attack, right? Yeah, so this is the forced withdrawal type situation. So if I can't win the combat into one of these areas, but that just doesn't look that hard to me. Why should I deal with these boats and be swooping around down this way? Other than the boats and the river and, well, Vicksburg itself are the reasons that I'm kind of playing this game. Why is it? Obviously I can't just charge right in there, but I could land here in Chickasaw Bayou and then just sort of grind my way in. The other option, as far as I see it, is again, drop myself in a bayou, maybe down here. Can I get there? Yeah, I can get there. This is part of Briarfield. I find this really hard to read. And then I could go up into here. However, my movement is very limited from there. This is why down here is appealing. First of all, the Confederates can't defend it. If I can get my boats down there, and it doesn't look that hard, I just have to go by 2 of these batteries, because this one I can ignore as far as I can tell. I have to go by 2 batteries, and then I land here, and I'm free and loose. That's less constrained than an attack from the north. But let me take a look at what the land campaign has as a setup. So Sherman is going to be in area 2, which is way up here. Okay? The rest is going to be down near area 35 over here near Hard Times. That's in preparation, obviously, for the landing down there. And that's about it. Wow, and I start getting reinforcements at area 35. Interesting. Where do those reinforcements come? Here, we're looking at 4th Division 16th Corps, for example. I'm just curious whether the shipping is being abstracted here, which sounds like it might be the case. Okay, 16th Corps, 4th Division is coming up in Area 1. So yeah, so the land campaign one is just kind of getting rid of all the boat stuff and saying, yeah, Grant's showing up down here and you get to play this out. I'm not sure that's exactly what I want to do. Here's the why. I would like to put pressure in multiple areas at once. Which is to say, I would like to do what, the campaign appears to be, which is, hey, let's try to use Sherman from one side and Grant from the other. Problem with that. You got to trace back to Grant. And the rules for tracing to an officer. Yeah, we're not actually playing. We're just trying to figure out. And honestly, that's a lot of what this game is going to be. Try to figure out how you can support your army and get it where you want to. So the communication from an officer to a commander is adjacent, but you can trace across roads. That looks like I would be able to trace down along here. So if I make my landing here, I would be out of command. But if I take this, I would not be. Interesting. One of the things I want to look at is what units are whose and where they are. So, Jesus. So I've got Sherman here. He's 15th and something else, and we got to look that up. Because we don't remember Where is Sherman? Fuck. I can't find the Sherman special rules. I know they're in here. That he has two commands under his, two divisions under his, or two corps under his command. But yeah, it looks to me like if I don't gather my whole army in one place, I am going to have some problems. So the idea of running these guys across doesn't seem to make sense unless everybody's going across. Whew, crappies. So then I've got to figure out how to shift everything down here, is what it seems to me. Fuck. I don't know how much I like that. One thing, my brief skim of the the exclusive rules for this scenario didn't catch was there's a rule here of, except as otherwise provided in scenario set up for initial, a maximum of 2 naval units of any type may stack on one river arrow at the end of any Union movement phase. Now, an unlimited number can pass through any river arrow. I don't see anything that requires them to stay stacked in 2s for movement, but I think that is the expectation given the way the combat chart works, where the shore battery hits either the top or bottom ship. So I think they're meant to move through in 2s. I only have 3 steamers here at the beginning of the game. I would prefer to get most of my units down by road rather by steamers. And I've flipped over all my Union units so I can see them. So I think that I'm going to wait until I have most of my ships, I guess. I don't know. I got a lot of steamers here. Shit. More than I can cover. Yeah, I mean, my main goal is to get enough steamers down here that I can transfer over. But here's the thing. This Sherman's command here is really the problem. And I can carry, let's see, I've got 22 strength points. That means it's going to take me 4 steamers, and I only have 3 here right now to move this force down. So I think that force is going to stick around down there, but I got to figure out what the rest of Sherman's command is. I don't think it's even on the board yet, which could cause some issues in terms of reduced movement or something. So I think he is going to stick around there waiting. But I don't know that I want to move my boats yet. I'll make that decision kind of after I see what my land movement is going to end up in. You know, how much can I get down to hard times? I also have this limitation on when the Confederates... Yeah, there's just so much pain here. When the Confederates are allowed to move into Area 43, which may be a special rule on this scenario, until turn 6, or until the Union player lands here. So that gives me a little bit of time to get down there. So yeah, I think I'm going to start trying to coordinate my forces and get them down there. That's not the easiest thing in the world, because I'm not really familiar with the command rules, right? What is it going to mean that Sherman's here? Well, he can load up on boats, I know that, but he's got other restrictions if he's out of command, which are, let's look again. They cannot block the enemy from tracing, wow, officers who cannot trace to the commander. Yeah, but I'm allowed to trace adjacent area or a continuous path along roads. Sherman does not have a road here. See, here's the thing. As long as I maintain a threat here, the Confederates kind of have to pay more attention, I think. but I don't know. God. It's just really painful to try to grasp the whole game, you know, because the big decision is right now. And I'm going to try to be kind of historical, but I can't follow the commentary because, you know, there's like one map for the Battle of Champion Hill, and that's it. And the rest of it, it's not absolutely clear. For example, Auburn is mentioned here. I can't figure out where Auburn is. Oh, it's up here. Wow. Okay. So I think Sherman is coming down along with McClellan. That's not... So Sherman and McClellan are attacking Auburn at some point in the game. It's not clear that Sherman would be moving from here because of the starting setup of the game. In fact, he's starting there on the land campaign as well. Or if he's operating in conjunction with the rest of the Union forces. If he's operating with the rest of the Union forces, why am I worried about holding this space? Well, maybe as a bluff. That's about the only thing I can see. So in order to provoke that bluff, I'm going to need a whole bunch of dummies on the board. I've placed them. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. There's not quite enough dummies to cover Grant's force and everything else. Everything else is more interesting to me. Okay. And then I'm afraid to move Sherman too far. His forces come in at 1. I could drop him down to 2. That wouldn't hurt me. So let's see what I can carry. I have 3 steamers. Okay. 3 steamers can carry, and this is where it gets hard because you're allowed, so the movement on board the boats doesn't appear to be limited to 2 steamers at a time worth of troops. And that's where I get it weird here. Each transport can carry 6 combat strength points. If it has 7 or more, it would require 2 transport steamers to carry it. There's no number to the restriction on the number of units that can be carried, so as long as no steamer carries more than 6 per turn. And again, there's no rule that says you can't move more than 2 of these at a time. The problem is you would have to drop things off, and I don't know what that would actually do. So I'm going to try to move them in packets of 2, which means if we want to load this up, we have 12. That's 2 steamers. That'll carry this. These guys are allowed to overstack at the beginning of the game. And then I got 6 more here. Now, I am going to slide these guys. Oh, I can't put them all down here. Geez, this is like illegal. Like, I cannot do what I want to do. Period, right? Because of the stacking limitations at the end of the turn. So, where is this again? A maximum of 2 arrows. Naval units may move both up speed. Except as otherwise provided in scenario setup rules for initial setup only. A maximum of 2 naval units of any type may stack on any one river arrow at the end of any Union movement phase. An unlimited number can pass through any. Which means I gotta have my boats up and down the river. I may have too many boats to fit on the river. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, assuming I just sit there and get shot up. 7, which is illegal as far as I can tell. 8, maybe 9 of these river crossing arrows. Maybe 10, because I don't know what that is. That looks like I can just charge across, you know, but whatever. So I got 10 of those. How many boats do I have? Well, if I have more than 20 boats, I'm definitely unable to hit anything legal. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 boats there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 boats here. So from what it looks like to me, it's physically impossible to play this game. I will be in a position where I cannot, you know, I mean, I don't know, maybe I can just keep boats floating in that initial place at the end of my movement phase because of the exception there. That's not spelled out. I think it's time for me to look at the second edition naval rules and see if they clarify any of this shit. Because right now the game does not look like the rules work. So one small modification was added, which is that the Union, and this fixes the problem, although it still sounds horrible, the Union has an infinite number of off-map spaces that it can park boats in. Which, you know, because all kinds of questions started being arising, like, well, if these are sitting here to move guys over here, what do I do with the rest of these boats? Are they still allowed to be there if I'm actually using the boats? Or do I just have free parking in that space until I move some boats? And then once I move them, I can only have 2 boats per space, which really starts to cause problems. There's no question of that. I don't know how the fuck I'm going to get across here by turn 6, but, well, we'll see if we can engineer it. God damn. The first thing I did is I'm moving these guys here, and I'm flipping them over to indicate that they've moved to the hidden side. That will help me keep track of what the fuck's going on. I hope I only have 5 here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I have an extra one. That means McLaren can actually move down here. Cav can move 2. I think I'm going to move Cav just down here to keep them flowing. Grant, I think I want to force march Grant, although maybe that's not really necessary. This way, and that'll get me a second move, but I got to make rolls for everyone. Let's check the temperature. I'm just going to play the temperature as it is. I don't have a die kicking around. Let me get some dice. All right, first we're going to check the weather. I don't know how much that'll affect it. So I have rain. Rain's not good. That increases the straggle rate. Let's see if I have a marker for this. There we go. And I don't know where to put it. We got rain. We got rain up on this turn. Which I'm fine with. Heat would kind of bother me this early in the year. Okay, so I don't think I actually want to force march Grant in that case, because that increases my straggle chance. So I'll push him down to here. Sherman loaded up on those boats and I moved them, I guess. These are off board now. What's going on with these guys? These guys could conceivably force march, so I'm going to do that up to here. Nah, I'll just leave them there. So what's going on here? I'm starting to pull 15th Division over. I could pull more of it over by doing this. Leave a gunboat here. Alright, so we'll put a unit of 15th Division here. We'll put 2 units of it here, I guess. Dummies. I got enough dummies here that I'm just gonna leave these here, I guess. I cannot cross. And what about this stack? I don't know. Move these here, move these here, and we'll call that the Union turn. Did we follow all the sequence items? Yeah, I think so. Which means we'll be going into the second player turn. I got to do some thinking about the Confederates too, and I need a rest after, after trying to parse the game that much. I definitely feel like I need a rest. I still feel like there's something really wonky about the
naval roles. But at least these seem to be able to follow something, which is of some value. I'm not expecting, I'm going to have to get the boats down here in order to transfer over. But I'm not expecting this to be a major series of naval operations going on. I might end up, after I clear something like this, I might end up using the boats for something else. But unless I can clear out most of these guns, I mean, I'm willing to run one battery, but I'm not really willing to run two every time I go downriver, and then essentially 4 every time I go upriver, just to be able to transport units. Because there is, I believe, a victory point value to the ships. Yeah, they're worth 5 points each. So I really don't want to lose those. All right, it's pause time then. Now this is the situation the Confederates are facing. And again, I flipped their units over. They have some definite command issues. Bowen's command down here is not in command. I kind of want to stay there. Remember, he's good on his own. I think I want to keep forces here at Vicksburg. Whatever, I mean, it's really kind of, what the fuck do I do? Pemberton's forces are not in command. I'm sorry, these are all Pemberton forces. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. When I look at the victory conditions, in order to get the victory points for owning Jackson, if they're infantry, the infantry must be able to trace a line of communications to its commander or officer during the communications phase. Which, if I look through my points for the Confederates, Jackson is the only thing I care about right now. I'm not really sure I need to be in command, which to me means that I want to run Pemberton back to Jackson, or else a cav unit back there, which might make even more sense, or the Vicksburg militia. But the cav can get there quicker, so I can start collecting the victory points for it. Because as it stands, all I have sitting there is a couple of infantry, which there's no reason for me to be in Jackson. So I think that's what we're going to move. I'm going to throw some dummies on the board and start shifting some forces. And again, no forced marches. We're going to push this sucker another turn out, and this pile of boats has become unmanageable. And move up to the second turn of the game. And yes, I'm taking it real slow. That's how I ease into something like this, to try to find enough pleasure in it that, maybe I can play more than one turn at a time or whatever. Because it really isn't a very long, each turn isn't very long. Right? At least right now they're taking, a couple moments, maybe 5 minutes of thought to do the Confederate turn. And you can see I'm spreading out, trying to present something that will make it not clear to the Union where my forces really are. Being able to walk away the way I do is going to make it easier to forget where things are, which is a good thing at this point. There might be times in the game where forgetfulness is actually more problematic than than what I want. But I will worry about that when I get there, and just keep trying to follow whatever path I have to follow to find my mojo with this game. Which I do not expect to see any combat on this first video. We'll probably get another turn or two in, and there's just no reason for there to be fighting. The Union's consolidating down here, getting ready to cross. The Confederates are shifting their forces around to confuse the Union a little bit. The game probably will not have too many battles. It's more a system of maneuver than it is a system of battering your way through. So actually, maybe it's because it's the Western Frontier theater instead of that the games in this that I have. Well, actually, I have Lee Takes Command, which, and I think I have like an expansion to that, Grant Takes Command, which are in the Virginia area. But in the West, you have a lot more room to try to force the enemy back in terms of just outpositioning him, as opposed to trying to batter your way through, as you see it more common in Virginia, which is why there are less, less continuous small battles happening in the West, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out my ass there because I'm trying to think. There are a lot of battles that happened out West. But there are a lot of little battles that happen in the East too, and that's kind of the thing. Most of the Civil War battles, there are no games on, just because they're basically skirmishes or whatever, and they don't attract a lot of attention. They didn't mean much. You have the Civil War Brigade series kind of shows the extent of the kind of larger battles that were fought. Some of them are stretching down into the pretty small area there. And then when you get to the regimental stuff, SPI's, the Great Battles of the American Civil War, whatever, became that. Things like Stonewall, the Battle of Kernstown. That's not a big battle. But, it shows up in Command and Colors, too, which I find kind of interesting. They don't have a whole lot of battles to handle in that, but that's one they chose as interesting enough to take care of. Of course, scale is so kind of wacky there. You could... yeah. Forces continue to shift. The weather's gotten better. One thing I want to point out, you'll see some of these stacks are actually illegal. I should have something like that. I'm not doing it for my own convenience, basically. If I was playing this opposed, I wouldn't. I would obey the regular stacking rules. I might when forces are engaged or close to engagement, where Cav can probe stacks and such not. But right now, it would be very disturbing. Like basically, I'd have to sort through all the stacks each turn instead of just keeping track of them as they stand. On to the Rebs. It's good weather. I'm going to try force marching this unit. It's going to go in extra space, and there are no modifiers that I see. So it would take a 3 or higher to cause straggling casualties. And in fact, we make it 1, 2, 3, which is where we want to be. Getting that cav over there so we can start scoring victory points. I will score them in the Union phase turn. I can't score them during the Confederate turn, which is kind of unfortunate because, I'm aware of what's there right now. That will involve having to show that unit that there is indeed a cav unit there that can do that. Keep moving. Of course, not a lot to see because everything's flipped over, but we're creating our cordon along the river line where we can. Some of those might not be real. That's part of the fun. Yeah, what would that mean? Jeez. Well, for example, if Snyder's Bluff isn't real, and it's not, somebody could go from Chickasaw up into there. But the problem is, I got to keep the whole Union force in command, essentially, to be able to do offensive actions. So that whole army has to either go down this way or make a probe across the river. And I just don't see the river option as being viable because, well, I'd have to move boats to send units over here, even dummies. Otherwise, it would be obvious they're dummies. And that could be an interesting factor. They might end up getting attacked and thrown out of there if there are any real forces that can reach there. So it's a risky proposition to try to express a threat against Vicksburg in the north. I wanted to point out, we're going into the next turn. There's a whole bunch more boats coming in. The Union Navy is now available for the most part. way more than can fit on the Mississippi River, which seems kind of ludicrous to me. I don't see why only 2 boats can be in a chunk of river that big, but that's the game. I have plenty of boats. I'm strapping the Choctaw and the steamer together coming down from here, and they are just going to sail down the river, and oops, they're stopped. Only 1 shot. Shore battery on a 6 it hits. There are 2 ships there. The top ship's not made out of wood, so we get through. We make it down to here. Again, the same thing. This is all the gunboats are good for, protecting those things. We make it through, and we keep sailing down, and we'll get down to here. That'll allow us next turn to start slowly shifting units in. The problem is, if we're only shifting 1 in, we got some difficulties coming. This, I don't know where the hell this bridges you to. This island, part of this, I don't know. It would make sense if it's over here, but that would be kind of weird as well, position-wise. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I am allowed to move this up to 2 spaces upriver now. So I'll move it up to there after it's gone downriver. Actually, I didn't even have to bring it all the way down, and I can do the same by shooting another gunboat pair down the river as well. Gathering more and more forces up here down at hard times. You can see the boats all getting ready. What can really be done? Yeah, not a lot. I got these 2 steamers. They're going to be able to pull 12 strength points a turn, and that's all I can shift in any reasonable fashion. I might be able to pick up units here, sail down, and drop them off. That might be legitimate. I'm not absolutely certain of that. And then move back up. So I might be able to get 12 strength points through in a turn. I've sent some forces over here into the bayou. They're not real, but you know, whatever. It doesn't make a lot of sense not to make the threat, although it's pretty weak. And at this point, the Confederates get their first victory point by claiming, hey, I've got a real unit in Jackson that doesn't need to be in command. And they do have to at least claim that there's a real unit there that's not in command. One of the questions, of course, you know, this isn't really a rules question or anything, but one of the questions is when you're playing something like this, you know, do you require them to show it? This game seems to imply that the players have to have a lot of trust, but one of the problems with that is that that kind of trust means that you both agree to and understand all the rules in the same manner, to the same degree, whatever, you know, that you have this general agreement. And I have to say, with this rule book, I would not trust that. You know, I don't trust my own interpretation of the rules between turns, essentially. Well, the Union kind of paid off. The Confederates did not do anything going into there. It turned out they didn't have anything except the artillery that started up here, but they shifted some forces over just to help defend that. Actually shifted north a little bit. Can't let this happen. That's basically what it comes down to. And not much I can do here, but you've got, you know, these forces here moving southward to handle what looks like it's the real threat, but that could be a pile of dummies. It is completely possible that you could, you know, absolutely fool your enemy. It's very hard to defend territory in this game because of all those dummies out there. That puts us to turn 4, and no losses to the gunboats that have been tracing their way down. I'm going to load this one up because it has been about an hour. It's the end of a turn, and that seems like a good place. And the Confederates are at a 1-point lead in the game. Whatever that matters. Nothing's happened.